folks, I want to welcome you to Carolina Fishing TV today. We're on the Welder's Ark, 56-foot Jarrett Bay.
Today we're going to talk about targeting three of North Carolina's most prominent inshore species, the speckled trout, the redfish, and the flounder.
We're going to show you basically what our tackle box consists of and the rigging techniques we use on these baits.
There's a ton of tackle out there available and a lot to choose from, and it's all about how much do you really need and what do you need. You know, how much do you need in that tackle box? So we're going to talk about that today and see if we can get an organized tackle box going, which you need to put on board your boat when you head out next time. All right, another species that is very, very sought after here in North Carolina is our flounder. We have several different populations of flounder: southern flounder, summer flounder, and Gulf flounder. And depending on the time of the year, that determines which species you're probably catching more of. But we start catching flounder as early as April, May, and it lasts all the way through November, December. One of the things that we like to do is become large. A very popular way to target these flounder here in North Carolina is Mike and I take jigs. I think Mike started this probably about 6 or 7 years ago around here, and I stole it from him. So, but we take jigs and we tip them with a soft bait. We like scented baits. We love those Berkeley gulps again. We typically use a shrimp, and one of the reasons why we use that shrimp is it's a thick-bodied bait. The 4-inch shrimp has got a really wide body on it. We'll tip it on a jig anywhere from a 1 to 3 ounce jig, depending on the depth of your water and the size of your rod and line and whatnot you're using. And we'll tip that shrimp on there. Reason why, again, we're using that 4-inch shrimp, sometimes a 4-inch pokey, but the larger baits on there is the girth of that bait. What we do find out is in the ocean, along those nearshore live bottoms, as well as in the inland waterway or along the inlets as well, you're going to get a lot of junk fish, what we call junk fish, a lot of small sea bass, lizard fish, little bluefish. Mike, what is that one fish we're seeing all the time come up and bite a square chunk out of our bait? Triggerfish. There's a lot of triggerfish down there. Folks don't realize it, but a lot of small 1 to 2 pound triggerfish, and they're really good at taking the tails off bait. So we use that wider bait. And basically we're taking that jig and we're putting several feet of about anywhere from 40 to 60 pound test fluorocarbon leader, a little bit heavier leader than we use like trout fishing and whatnot. We're digging in sometimes to grouper too. We'll catch a grouper 5, 10, sometimes 12, 14 pounds or so before we're at the point where our tackle can't handle it. So we'll use about a 40, 50, 60 pound test leader on that, several feet. And then we're basically just jigging that off the bottom, working it like if somebody's familiar with sting silvers for gray trout, we're working it like that off the bottom along these ledges and nearshore bottoms. So about a half a mile off the beach, and one of the places we came to this morning, we caught just a couple of fish. They weren't really feeding hard this morning. We came back to check it out. We've had probably 10 to 12 flounders, anywhere from 14, 15 inches on up to 20 inches now in the last 30 minutes. So they're hitting these spro bucktails. My father just put up his live bait. Oh, get it. I told you to get in there, what I said.
Had to throw the rod down on that one.
I've never seen one sit that long.
That's on the big kahuna there.
Yeah, show him that bait.
He's about 16 inches.
Right there.
That's another gulp bait, just a different style.
The other technique we use is a Carolina rig, and we just buy pre-rigged hooks. They come with a little bead on them already. That's just the simplest way. Come with a circle hook. Simple is easy. So,
especially when you're going through dozens of them a day like we do.
Yeah, we can tie this rig up in a matter of 20 seconds. I mean, it doesn't take but a second. That hook comes with just that bead and a little loop on the end. All you do is go about halfway, tie you a square knot, slide your bead down, and whatever weight you want to use, these are probably 3/4 ounce. We would probably use them, I don't know, if we had a fast drift in the inlet channel or something. Definitely around docks that'd be too heavy. We're going to use just as light as we can get away with, because you're going to be throwing up in there and pulling it back real easy to you. In the ocean, we'd use probably 1.5 ounce to 2 ounce.
Yeah.
In the ocean, that'll hold bottom pretty good. This particular spot is a little bit shallower than where we've been fishing, so I scaled down. This is about 1/4 ounce.
Yeah, this is probably 4 or 5 foot of water around here.
Less tide, shallower water. scale down. It doesn't take as much weight. So you scale down your weights, you won't hang the bottom up as much. There's a lot of hangs around here.
A lot of hangs, a lot of boulders down there.
Anything on it?
Feels like something. Yep.
There you go. Oh, yeah. And you're going to use this with either a menhaden or a finger mullet. Finger mullet seems to work the best. Menhaden, they'll get there and constantly swim, and they tangle your rig up. So we try to use mullets if we can, don't we? I mean,
early in the year, I think a lot of times we'll try to get, you'll find tiger side minnows along the sandy shores, along the inlets, and they're anywhere from several inches long to 4 or 5 inches long, and they're really good baits because they like to dig into the bottom too, versus Mike said, like those menhaden, they'll stay up top and swim around. That rig that Mike just tied to, we've got, we call this a modified Carolina rig. A typical Carolina rig, if you're familiar with the Carolina rig, a typical Carolina rig has the sinker. It's not on the leader. It's not on the leader that contains the hook there. A typical Carolina rig has got your sinker above your swivel, between your swivel and your rod tip. And a typical Carolina rig allows you, when you free spool it, it allows a fish to pull the line through your sinker for eternity until you put resistance on them. The only drawback to a typical Carolina rig, what we're doing, is we're fishing for flounder. If you've ever heard about fishing for flounder, it's a structure-oriented fish, and we're a lot of times, if we're in the ocean, we're around ledges and a lot of rocky bottom. If we're in the ICW, we're around dock pylons and whatnot. And most folks have got fishing with monofilament, 10 or 15 or 20 pound test monofilament, or maybe a 10 or 20 pound braid. So if we were to put that sinker above that swivel on our main line, which is our line coming up from our fishing rod, what's going to happen is if a fish does take line, pull our bait through that sinker, we're going to then have our main line rubbing the bottom, rubbing all that structure. And to avoid that, we put it on the leader material. Mike tied that square knot down about halfway between the swivel and the hook. It's giving him enough distance right here between that sinker and that hook for that fish not to really be bothered by that weight. At the same time, when that fish grabs that hook, he has a little bit of play. There's 6 inches, 8 inches, 10 inches, 12 inches, a foot, a little over a foot for that fish to kind of move around while he's getting that bait down so he doesn't feel that weight. And then on top of that, Mike set this thing up. He talked about size of the weight we're using. So, we like to use the smallest weight possible while keeping our bait on the bottom so that a fish doesn't detect that, that abnormal weight to the bait he just struck and release the bait on.
Yeah, I mean, fishing around docks with that little 1/8 or little quarter, I mean, they'll drag that weight around. They don't even feel it.
No.
The last bait we used, and we use a lot in the rivers and around rocks and just everywhere inside for flounder, is that spinner bait. And you can, however depth of water you're fishing, that's what size weight you're going to put on that jig. We definitely take the jig it comes with off of it, and we put our jig on it. You put a little bit of super glue on this jig and put any kind of a golfer bait on it, and you can't pull it off. I mean, you can cast it all day long and it just don't come off. This bait here has like a little spring, and you have to twist the bait on. Doesn't work well, and the hook's so short. it just,
it's hard to get a hook set.
Yeah, doesn't work well. We use our big shank, bigger hook, and we can put our light jig heads on it. But that spinner bait really attracts flounder. I mean, it will catch a flounder. You've seen that on our previous shows. I mean, I don't know if he'll keep or not.
He's a keeper.
I think he's 14.
I believe he'd be right on it.
That's the advantage of throwing a spinnerbait. Catches flounder and reds. Don't catch too many trout on them, but flounder and drums, I hit them.
It allows you to cover the water real quickly, Plus, not only that, a lot of times you're casting these bays. Mike and I are talking about you're casting to the shore, and the shore usually, at least down near the coastal end of the, not up the rivers, but down near the mouth of the rivers and along the ICW and between the ICW and the inlets. Those shorelines are lined with a lot of shell. So if we were to toss a Carolina rig into the shores trying to target a flounder with a live bait on or something, you're going to hang bottom. Or a jig head without a spinner bait on it, a spinner blade. That spinner blade causes that resistance, which allows you to, you don't actually have to work the bait so much. You just speed up the retrieve a little bit and it raises it up in the water column. So if you're bumping bottom, getting into that shell, you can just speed up your retrieve a little bit. Just bring it off the bottom. We like it bumping the bottom, but you know you don't want to hang the bottom either. So
I actually, when I work it, I jig it. And, you know, basically most people will just pull a spinner bait steady through the water. I'll work it just like a jig head myself. I'll pull it up, let it fall to the bottom. Pull it up, let it fall to the bottom, and that's how I catch all mine. I work my spinner baits most of the time. We're going to talk about the baits for redfish. We're going to start out with our search bait, and definitely the most exciting way to catch reds.
there's no other way to do it.
That's it. So I'll go ahead and talk
what we
about
got
that.
is Mike's talking about the legendary topwater bait, and there's a variety of them. There's a lot of companies that put them out. Depending on what bait you're getting from each company, they put out a different pitch too, which does matter sometimes. These are by Head, Zara's topwater spooks. We've got Rapala's topwater in there. Mirrorlure's got a little topwater, and then Mirrorlure's larger topwater baits, the Juniors, the Top Dog, the She Dog. There's a bunch of them. Mostly, pretty much with them, we're dealing with size and sound difference on them. So, but the biggest thing is, like Mike was talking about, that topwater bait allows us to cover a lot of water. You don't have to let it sink. You're not working the water column, so you're not worried about where's your bait at in the water column. Your bait's right on top, staring at you. You little pop and twitching motion, it's just turning back and left and right, coming at you like a mouse trying to swim across a pond or something. And it's funny because it is kind of like freshwater fishing too. You know, folks, they target bass with topwater baits. Well, that redfish is called, I think down south we learned this past year, it was called a spot-tailed bass. They called it down in South Carolina and Georgia. So, and you know, maybe we'll start calling them here that in North Carolina one day too. But that topwater bait's exciting because when he comes up, I mean, a little 24, 25-inch redfish, he'll put out an explosion 3 foot wide. You know, a big 27, 28 incher to look like somebody fell in the water on it, and it catches you by surprise. So it's just, you know, you're popping it along, talking to your friends, all of a sudden, boosh, and you look over and you swear an alligator came out and bit your bait. So there's nothing more exciting than that. But the biggest thing is it's a search bait. We can cover a lot of water real fast, and even if he doesn't hit that, he's going to come up and look at it. And we watch. We're constantly staring behind our bait and under our bait, and we'll see that nose of that fish coming up, or we'll see that bowl under it. And you know, if Mike's got the topwater bait on and they're not hitting it, yeah, I think on a few shows we did it this year where we've got a couple of our jig baits there with soft plastic jig baits waiting right there next to us. If Mike hollers, you know, got a strike on the top water, first thing I'm doing is grabbing my jig bait, tossing it behind him if he wants to eat that. But
There he is. He hit it.
Nice fish.
Good fish.
You're welcome.
I took in Mike's using a topwater bait there. And we've talked about it before, but sometimes we'll try to keep a soft bait ready. We came after Mike 2 or 3 times and he wouldn't hit it. And we tried that this morning a couple times and the fish just wouldn't come back at him. So when I hit the water with that bait, I skimmed across the top of the water about 5 or 6 feet real quick, kind of like it was a topwater bait, and then let it settle down and sit on the bottom. And he just came right to it and picked it up.
Good fish too. Good.
It looks better than what we got.
You always have to be prepared. We always keep 2 rods. You can see right here. Spinner bait. 4-inch poke.
He's about a 24. He's a whole lot better, which we only have one anyway, so anything's good right now.
Boy, green.
Anything's good right now. He ain't that big, but right now that's our second decent fish or keeper fish. So.
The top dog is definitely, if we're searching, covering a lot of water, we're going to go with the top dog because you can cast it
right
20, 30 feet farther than any of these other ones sitting up here. I think if we've located fish and they want top water, my favorite is the skitterwalk.
Yeah, the Rapala.
Yeah, and this, you know, this just come out the box.
Get you there.
These are the hooks that it comes with. We'll change them out, and we'll actually put these top dog hooks on here. They're a little bigger,
little stronger.
A little stronger.
We've actually used as the top water baits on with striper fishing and caught fish up to 30 some odd pounds on those same hooks, and they hold up. I mean, you know, you got to work your drag, but
What are you talking about 30? You caught 146 in that tournament.
yeah, we did. Mike wanted that one bad that day too.
on that top water bait, you know. Yeah. I mean, set your drag. You know, you can't lock down. You're going to straighten hooks out. But
yeah,
probably our most favorite bait is that 4-inch pogey. Jeff stole a lot of fish off me this year.
But I did one 2 weeks ago like that on.
that last tournament. But no, just, you know, kidding aside, this bait here, you can throw it out there. You can throw it out there and just leave it there, really. But no, I mean, that is one of our top baits. Rigged with this Mr. Twister 1/8 ounce jig. This is a strong, you know, super strong hook, super sharp hook. But that is just, I think, my favorite, you know, for catching fish. The hookup ratio is probably 90%. If you hook him 90%, you're going to catch him. I'd say with the top water, it goes down to about 60,
anywhere from 50 to 70% on the top water bait. And, you know, Mike's talking about that bait. He's not necessarily just talking about that white color there. I mean, Berkeley's got them in pink. They got them in New Penny. They got them in smoke, all different colors. It was more about the presentation of that bait. Like he talked about earlier with that spinner bait. You know, when you're working that spinner bait through the water, that spinner blade itself, that round paddle-looking spinner bait, allows resistance, which can bring your bait up in the water column. Same thing with that paddle tail on the back of that pogey. That paddle tail, as you retrieve it, it's resistance and allows your bait to rise up and not sink so bad, or as much as like the shrimp that doesn't have that tail on it. It also, when Mike talked about working his bait, lifting it and dropping it, any paddle tail bait, when you lift it and drop it, the paddle is like a parachute. So the paddle stays up, the nose goes down, and the bait flutters down. Whereas maybe in that particular situation, like he's talking about, that shrimp, you let it drop, it just kind of falls. It doesn't have that parachute-like paddle tail on the back to cause it to flutter. Yeah, so that's a vibration, which again goes back to the same thing that occurs with your spinner blade. It's a vibration. That vibration, does fish key in on it, pick up on it, and they just kill it. When
you put this in the water, a lot of people will put it in the water and pull it just to see if that tail works. And it might not work going slow, but when you jerk it, when you're working that bait, when you jerk it, it's going to vibrate, it's going to work. And then it's just going to lay to the bottom like a natural injured, you know, minnow. And you're always going to get the hit when it's falling back to the bottom.
Right.
So the vibration of the tail, for sure, doesn't matter. You know, I take a lot of people and they'll look and, man, this thing's not vibrating. You know, it's not fluttering. It doesn't need to flutter. If you look at an injured bait, he'll take off and swim, then he'll stop, and he'll just fall motionless. And that's exactly what that bait does. I mean, it's definitely.
So when we put our own jig heads on these things, a lot of times what we find out is they're not facing the right way. They're not lined up. That hook is not protected by that blade there, and they'll be turned like 90 degrees like this. And we might hang bottom more often. So Mike, he's got a little trick he does here.
I'm tying this spinner bait. Let's see what I've done with it. All right. Here's the hook that comes on it. I put these hooks on it. They hold the bait on a lot better for me. There's a pack of them, Mr. Twister, 1/8 ounce. This is the chartreuse. But you can see it has a longer, that hook sets back on that bait a little bit more. I pinch that wire down. Now you see right now, see how that bait's gonna run? Sideways. I'll take and bend this wire. Now it runs straight over top the bait. I put the 4-inch pearl white pogey on this spinner bait. It's blades right over top of the bait. And as you can see out here in the water, it's nothing but little pogies. And they're about as big as that bait. That bait, that blade, that vibration attracts them. And another thing, if you catch especially a upper slot red or just a strong red, you'll notice when you come back, that thing's unhooked.
They'll unclip it.
what we do is take the pliers and just smash it down over that wire, and that just locks it in place. You'll never have to, it'll be hard done, you know, to change out hooks, but you don't never have to worry about missing a fish because that comes unhooked.
You usually don't find yourself changing out hooks on the spinner baits too
Nope.
much. So that spinner blade is definitely good for that darker water. It's a good search bait too. It allows you to work real fast, and that blade will draw fish in from, you know, several feet.
All right, folks, this is our basic tackle for redfish, flounder, and trout. This is what is in our tackle boxes throughout every day, every tournament we fish. This is our tackle box for the 3 species we covered today. We'd also like to thank Dudley's. I purchased all these baits here from Dudley's. That's about mainly who we shop through. Any bait we come in there and want, you know, we just go talk to the owner, John Dudley, and 3 days he'll have it on the shelf.
Usually a couple days later.
Every time, 3 days, buddy. He's on top of it. He is definitely the best outfitted tackle shop that I've been to on, you know, the East Coast.
Folks, again, this is our inshore, you know, primarily inshore, not necessarily just inshore. We did talk a little bit about flounder fishing. That does happen along the beach, but most of this stuff we're talking about is inshore fishing. Stay tuned, because coming up soon here in the future, we're going to be talking about nearshore species, predominantly ocean-related stuff, our Spanish and kings and grouper fishing and whatnot. So stay tuned.